Hey boys and girls, so you just learned the 3 new vocabulary words, amused, enchanted, and infant. I'd like you to pay close attention to the vocabulary word infant, because the question that you're going to answer in your reading journal today is, in what ways did Fern treat Wilber as if he were an infant? So as I'm reading today, I would like you to think about how Fern takes care of Wilber and how she treats him like an infant. So now I'm just going to read to you Chapter 2, Wilber. Fern loved Wilber more than anything. She loved to stroke him, to feed him, to put him to bed. Every morning, as soon as she got up, she warmed his milk, tied his bib on, and held the bottle for him. And stroke means to rub gently. Every afternoon when the school bus stopped in front of her house, she jumped out and ran to the kitchen to fix another bottle for him. She fed him again at supper time and again just before going to bed. Mrs. Arable gave him a feeding around noontime each day when Fern was away at school. Wilber loved his milk, and he was never happier than when Fern was warming up a bottle for him. He would stand and gaze up at her with adoring eyes. So to gaze at somebody, you're kind of just looking at somebody like this. For the first few days of his life, Wilber was allowed to live in a box near the stove in the kitchen. Then, when Mrs. Arable complained, he was moved to a bigger box in the woodshed. At 2 weeks of age, he was moved outdoors. It was apple blossom time, and the days were getting warmer. Mr. Arable fixed a small yard especially for Wilber under an apple tree, and gave him a large wooden box full of straw with a doorway cut in it so he could walk in and out as he pleased. "Won't he be cold at night?" asked Fern. "No," said her father. "You watch and see what he does." Carrying a bottle of milk, Fern sat down under the apple tree inside the yard. Wilber ran to her, and she held the bottle for him while he sucked. When he had finished the last drop, he grunted and walked sleepily into the box. Fern peered through the door. Wilber was poking the straw with his snout, his nose. In a short time, he had dug a tunnel in the straw. He crawled into the tunnel and disappeared from sight, completely covered with the straw. Fern was enchanted. It relieved her mind to know that her baby would sleep covered up and would stay warm. Every morning after breakfast, Wilber walked out to the road with Fern and waited with her till the bus came. She would wave goodbye to him, and he would stand and watch the bus until it vanished around a turn. While Fern was in school, Wilber was shut up inside the yard, meaning that he was closed inside the yard. But as soon as she got home in the afternoon, she would take him out and he would follow her around the place. If she went to the house, Wilber went too. If she went upstairs, Wilber would wait at the bottom step until she came down. If she took her doll for a walk in the doll carriage, Wilber followed along, and sometimes on these journeys, Wilber got tired and Fern would pick him up and put him in the carriage alongside the doll. He liked this, and if he was very tired, he would close his eyes and go to sleep under the doll's blanket. He looked cute when his eyes were closed because his lashes were so long. The doll would close her eyes too, and Fern would wheel the carriage very slowly and smoothly so as not to wake her infants. One afternoon, Fern and Avery put on bathing suits and went down to the brook for a swim. Wilber tagged along at Fern's heels. When she waded in the brook, not waded like waited for something to happen. Waded means to kind of stand around and splash in shallow water. So while Fern was wading in the brook, Wilber waded in there with her. He found the water quite cold, too cold for his liking. So while the children swam and played and splashed water at each other, Wilber amused himself in the mud along the edge of the brook, where it was warm and moist and delightfully sticky and oozy. Every day was a happy day, and every night was peaceful. Wilber was what farmers called a spring pig, which simply means that he was born in springtime. Here's just a picture of Fern with her baby doll and Wilber in the baby carriage. When he was 5 weeks old, Mr. Arable said he was now big enough to sell and would have to be sold. Fern broke down and wept, but her father was firm about it. Wilbur's appetite had increased. He was beginning to eat scraps of food in addition to milk. Mr. Arable was not willing to provide for him any longer. He had already sold Wilbur's 10 brothers and sisters. "He's got to go, Fern," he said. You have had your fun raising a baby pig, but Wilbur is not a baby any longer, and he has got to be sold." "Call up the Zuckermans," suggested Mrs. Arable to Fern. "Your Uncle Homer sometimes raises a pig, and if Wilbur goes there to live, you can walk down the road and visit him as often as you like." "How much money should I ask for him?" Fern wanted to know. "Well," said her father, "he's a runt. Tell your Uncle Homer you've got a pig you'll sell for $6 and see what he says." It was soon arranged, Fern phoned and got her Aunt Edith, and her Aunt Edith hollered for Uncle Homer, and Uncle Homer came in from the barn and talked to Fern. When he heard that the price was only $6, he said he would buy the pig. Next day, Wilbur was taken from his home under the apple tree and went to live in a manure pile in the cellar of Zuckerman's barn. So now think about what I had asked you in the beginning before we read the chapter. I asked you, in what ways did Fern treat Wilbur as if he were an infant? So think of the vocabulary word, what does infant mean? And think of how Fern treated the pig, Wilbur, as her infant. And while you're doing that, just watch the next video because I'm going to do a little example of how to write a complete sentence. You are expected to write at least 3 ways Wilbur was treated like an infant. 2 sentences if you can. If you could do 3, that would be great. All right, good luck, boys and girls. Watch the next video to see what is expected of you when you're writing a sentence. Good job.